The storm is past, or so he thinks. He stands on the precipice of his own progress, looking out at a horizon he finally believes he owns. For weeks, the fire within has transitioned from a raging, uncontrollable wildfire into a steady, glowing hearth. He feels the surge of a new kind of vitality, a presence that doesn't just occupy space, but commands it. He is, by all external measures, the master of his domain. Hold on, before we unlock the real power of semen retention, hit that subscribe button and join our Telegram channel, link in description. We drop daily wisdom, success tools, and energy secrets only shared there. Don't watch from the sidelines, become part of the movement. But in the dead of the night, when the world is breathless and the noise of the day has finally dissolved, a new sound begins to echo through the corridors of his mind. It is not a roar. It is not the familiar, jagged scream of a craving he has already defeated. It is something far more haunting, a low, vibrating hum of internal pressure. He looks into the mirror and sees a man who is stronger, faster, and more focused. Yet, for the first time, he is utterly unsettled by the silent intensity of the man looking back. This is the moment most narratives fail to mention. This is the shadow that waits behind the light of transformation. You have survived the withdrawal, you have ignored the whispers of the past, and you have built a fortress of discipline. You think the war is over because the enemy has retreated from the gates? What you do not realize is that the enemy hasn't left. It has simply moved into the basement of your soul, waiting for the silence to become unbearable. You are standing at the threshold of the most painful phase of semen retention, a period that does not feel like a struggle against habit, but a struggle against existence itself. It is a phase that arrives precisely when you think you have already won. It is the weight of the energy you have gathered, now demanding to know what you intend to do with it. Most men are prepared for the fight, but almost no one is prepared for the weight of the victory. If you have felt a strange, nameless restlessness, lately a sense that you are more powerful, yet more fragile than ever, then you have entered the crucible. You are no longer fighting your shadows. You are being asked to carry the light. And the light, as you are discovering, is heavy. It is a burden that will either forge you into something eternal or crush you under the weight of your own unresolved truth. There is a phase of this journey that almost no one describes with any degree of honesty. It is not the beginning, characterized by the raw, kinetic energy of a new leaf turned. It is not the phase of intense, agonizing desire that keeps you awake at the start. It is not even the initial struggle against the gravity of old, destructive habits. Those are the battles of the amateur. The true test begins when the body feels stronger and the mind feels quieter. This phase is dangerous precisely because it disguises itself as progress. Most men enter this practice expecting a linear evolution, a straight line pointing upward toward more energy, more focus, and more respect. In the beginning, this is exactly what they receive. The signs are undeniable. Something within awakens. A dormant power, resists in the man begins to believe he has finally decoded the secret of masculine mastery. But that is exactly when the alignment begins to slip. It doesn't happen with a sudden crash or a dramatic failure. It starts with a subtle discomfort, a restlessness without a clear motive. It is a strange sensation of internal pressure, a desire to drop everything and run, not out of weakness, but out of a profound and sudden confusion. This is the phase no one warns you about because it doesn't look like a problem from the outside. So many strong, disciplined, and sincere men end up falling during this time without ever understanding why. They mistake the test for a mistake. They mistake the heavy silence for stagnation. They mistake the sheer weight of their own accumulated energy for a sign of an impending relapse. They try to win this phase through brute force, but brute force is exactly what causes the structure to fracture. Every man who embarks on this path does so with a set of expectations, whether he admits them to himself or not. He may claim he seeks discipline or spiritual clarity, but deep down, there is a silent image of the man he expects to become. He expects to rise in energy, in presence, and in the eyes of others. This expectation is fed by 1,000 stories of rapid transformation and the promise that simply retaining is enough. The man imagines this path as an upward straight line. He believes that more days equals more strength, more control, and more peace. In the early stages, the narrative holds true. The body responds to the change. The posture straightens. The mind slows its frantic pace. The impulses lose their jagged edges. This creates a dangerous association, the belief that this is a simple, mechanical process of accumulation. He begins to view his energy as a prize. He has won rather than a responsibility he must direct. This is the first invisible error. Retention was never designed to be a comfortable state of being. It was designed to be a revelation. The man enters expecting to feel better, but instead, he feels more exposed. He expects to feel more confident, but instead, he finds himself confronted by parts of himself he didn't know existed. When the first signs of this deep discomfort appear, he interprets them as a failure of the system. He begins to measure his progress only by external metrics. He asks if he is being more productive or if he is receiving more respect. He almost never asks what this energy is awakening within him that was previously dormant. That question is too heavy to carry. The wrong expectation turns a profound internal alchemy into a superficial self-improvement project. The man tries to use this power to become more attractive or dominant without realizing that the process is trying to dismantle his old identity before it can build anything new. When the dismantling begins, the shock is inevitable. The mind, which once seemed clear, begins to reveal old, static noise. Emotions that were muffled by years of distraction suddenly appear without warning. Internal conflicts gain a new, terrifying volume. Thoughts he believed were long ago resolved return with a force he cannot explain. He expected stability, but he found a high-tension wire. He expected a better version of himself, but he began to see the parts of himself he would rather have left in the dark. This is the breaking of expectation. It is a dangerous moment because it comes without a warning label. No one tells the man that when the process begins to work for real, it doesn't strengthen him. First, it exposes him. He reacts the only way he knows how. He tries to fix the discomfort. He forces more discipline. He hardens his control, trying to claw his way back to the good state of the beginning. He doesn't realize that the initial state was never the goal. It was only the door. By fighting the discomfort, he is fighting his own evolution. He makes silence feel like emptiness and internal pressure feel like an error. This is the ground upon which the most dangerous phase is built. When a man believes that retaining is just about holding on, he fails to notice when the energy begins to demand a channel. Energy without direction does not strengthen a man. It pressures him until he breaks. The first sign of this misalignment isn't a fall. It is a contrast. Externally, the man looks better than ever. He is firm, present, and contained. But internally, nothing fits. It isn't common anxiety or even sexual desire. It is a sensation that is far harder to name: a silent, subterranean pressure. He wakes up, he trains, he works, and he maintains his discipline. Yet a voice inside him begins to ask, now what? That question did not exist in the beginning. In the start, the focus was the challenge itself. Now that the immediate enemy of impulse is gone, he is left with the content of his own soul. Unresolved memories, ignored frustrations, and existential doubts all rise to the surface. The energy that was once spent on dispersion and distraction now circulates internally. When it finds no clear direction, it begins to press against the weak points of his psychological structure. This is where the confusion takes root. He believes the practice has stopped working, or that he has gone too far. He doesn't realize he isn't losing ground. He is being invited to inhabit a larger space. Everything that was poorly defined in his life now gains volume. He finds himself irritated by the smallest inconveniences. He feels a strange urge to escape, not necessarily through his old habits, but through any form of distractions, social media, food, or excessive work. Anything to relieve the pressure of his own presence. He treats this discomfort as a bug in the system rather than a feature. The most dangerous phase of this journey doesn't begin with a moment of weakness. It begins with a moment of confidence. It is the moment the man decides he has mastered himself. He no longer fights the daily battle against desire, and so he lowers his guard. He believes the worst is over and trades deep, active attention for a state of relaxed vigilance. This is where the game changes. The practice stops testing your habits and begins testing your identity. Your body may obey, and your impulses may no longer dominate. But your mind has not yet learned to sustain this new level of existence. You feel a strength you don't know how to use and a clarity you don't know how to direct. You have power without proportional maturity. This disproportion is a silent trap. Human consciousness cannot tolerate high tension for long without seeking a resolution. In this phase, treacherous thoughts arise, disguised as cold, hard logic. You tell yourself you've proved your point. You tell yourself that once won't matter. You convince yourself that you are being too rigid and that you deserve a release from the pressure. These aren't temptations of the flesh. They are rational arguments for the relief of the soul. The man believes he is making a conscious choice when, in reality, he is simply trying to escape an internal pressure he hasn't learned to integrate. He doesn't realize that the energy is demanding a new response, not more control, but more alignment. Silence, which was once a relief, now begins to weigh like lead. Moments spent alone become uncomfortable. Rest feels like an invitation to madness. The mind desperately searches for a stimulus. This is why many men don't relapse into their old habits immediately. Instead, they relapse into distraction, irritation, and the need for external validation. They are still counting the days, but internally, they are fragmenting. The more they ignore this fragmentation, the more the energy transforms into psychological pressure. They think the problem is an excess of energy, so they try to suppress it further. They try to become harder, more rigid, not realizing that rigidity is exactly what causes a structure to snap. The classic error of the strongman is the belief that discipline is always about tightening the grip. When he feels the internal restlessness, he reacts by increasing his rigidity. He tells himself it's a matter of resistance. He believes that if he can just hold on a little longer, the feeling will pass. But this phase wasn't created to be won by force. It was created to reveal where his strength is still brittle. By suppressing the discomfort, he enters into a state of civil war with himself. The energy isn't asking for repression. It's asking for a mission. It's asking for a container. The man tries to return to the good vibe of the early days, not realizing that that version of himself is gone forever. Attachment to the past is what causes the eventual fall. Another error is mistaking silence for emptiness. When the mental noise drops, the man thinks he is stuck or that he has lost his motivation. He thinks something inside him has died because he no longer feels the high of the struggle. He doesn't understand that something is being dismantled to make room for a deeper foundation. Dismantling is never a comfortable process. He begins to fill that silence with small concessions, excessive consumption, unnecessary arguments, or seeking the eyes of others to tell him he is still powerful. He tells himself he is just balancing his life. But slowly, the presence he worked so hard to build begins to leak out through these small holes. He isn't falling suddenly. He is gradually moving away from himself. At this point, shame often prevents him from being honest. He hasn't failed in the traditional sense, but he knows he isn't right. He isolates himself to maintain the image of strength. This isolation only accelerates the collapse. This phase demands the opposite of brute force. It demands a lucid awareness and a terrifying level of humility. The man who tries to win by arm wrestling his own soul will eventually tire. He will yield, he will fall, and he will blame the practice itself rather than his approach to it. He will think he failed because he wasn't strong enough, when in fact he failed because he wasn't flexible enough to grow. The true test is not physical. It is the way you sustain your presence in the world. The energy exposes where you still depend on external stimuli to feel alive. It shows you who you are when you aren't reacting to anything. What moves you when there is no urgency? What sustains you when no one is looking? These questions arise as a profound discomfort because they illuminate the non-integrated zones of your psyche. You may discover that your discipline was fueled by old anger, or that your strength was a mask for your fear of looking weak. You may realize your identity was entirely supported by professional or social validation. When these false bases crumble, the instability is terrifying. The mind calls it a loss of motivation, but it is actually a reorganization of the self. Can you remain whole without needing to prove yourself? The process removes the noise, so the truth can appear. Many men try to go back to the simpler version of themselves, the one that didn't have to deal with the weight of internal silence. But consciousness does not move backward. You can fall, but you can no longer fall innocent. You fall knowing, and that is a much deeper pain. Crossing this phase requires a change in internal posture. Energy doesn't want to be contained forever. It wants to be organized. As long as you are only holding on, you are in a state of tension. When you begin to direct that energy into your work, your presence, and your silence, the tension transforms into a rock-solid stability. Directing energy doesn't mean doing more things. It means being whole in what you are already doing. Simple acts: walking without distraction, training with total focus, working without dispersion, become the tools of integration. Stop fighting the discomfort. It is not an error. It is a signal that your old self is too small for your new power. The man who successfully crosses this threshold learns the difference between impulse, tension, and direction. Impulse asks for a discharge. Tension asks for understanding. Direction asks for a conscious, sovereign choice. Confusing these three is the primary cause of every relapse. The crossing requires less information and more assimilation. The sign that you are through is not a feeling of euphoria. It is a silent, unshakable stability. You notice that you no longer need to react to every stimulus. The mind slows down without effort. Silence stops being a threat and starts being a home. You haven't repressed your nature. You have finally integrated it into a higher order. After the crossing, there is no emotional explosion or victory lap. There is only an inner quietude that is, in many ways, more profound than the initial chaos. You are no longer holding anything. You simply no longer have the need to discharge your life force to feel whole. You have become less divided, and therefore, more powerful. The mind no longer pulls against the body. The energy no longer presses, because it has found its channel. You realize that the practice was never about the days on a calendar. It was about the alignment of your interior. The question is no longer how much power does this give me, but what am I doing with the presence I have been given? Few reach this stage because few accept that real growth is quiet and unglamorous. It doesn't feed the ego or make for an impressive story. It deepens you. It makes you responsible for the space you occupy. It turns a struggle into a silent, eternal vigilance. You have moved from a state of war to a state of truth. If this video gave you real value, tap the thanks button. Your support helps me keep creating deeper content like this. Every thanks is a spark that keeps this mission alive. Your support means more than you know. If you have stayed this long, it is because you recognize the truth in this discomfort. What you are living through is not a mistake. It is an invitation to live with more presence than impulse, more truth than force, and more depth than appearance. It is an invitation meant only for those willing to remain whole even when the world is not watching.